I remember the moment it hit me like a freight train. It was a Tuesday evening, the kind where the sun sets too quickly, leaving behind a shroud of darkness that feels heavier than the fatting daylight. I had just come home from a long day at work, the kind where you're surrounded by paperwork and decisions that feel as heavy as lead. My wife, Rachel, was supposed to be there, waiting with a warm smile and a glass of wine. Instead, the house was eerily silent. I walked into our bedroom expecting to find her in her usual spot on the bed, perhaps reading a book or scrolling through her phone. Instead, I found her phone lying innocently on the nightstand. It buzzed, a message flashing across the screen, one that would change everything. I picked it up, my heart racing, and there it was, a text from my lawyer, Mark. "Can't wait to see you tonight, just us." The world around me blurred, my breath caught in my throat, and for a moment I thought I might faint. Mark. My lawyer. The man I had trusted with my life, my finances, my future. My mind raced as I replayed the moments leading up to that text. The late-night meetings, the casual touches, the laughter that seemed too intimate. I always thought it was just the chemistry of a good professional relationship, but now it felt like a cruel joke. I dropped the phone back onto the nightstand, feeling sick. Betrayal washed over me like a cold wave, and I staggered back, gripping the edge of the bed for support. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the word betrayal. I felt like an actor in a tragedy, one where the plot twist is so jarring that it leaves you breathless. Rachel and I had built a life together. We were the couple everyone envied, at least that's what I thought. We had our ups and downs like any relationship, but we always managed to find our way back to each other, or so I believed. Now with that single text, the foundation of our marriage crumbled beneath me. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, anger, confusion, sorrow. I felt like a fool, so utterly naive. I had trusted Mark to guide me through the complexities of law to ensure that my interests were protected. But now he was the very source of my anguish, the architect of my heartbreak. My hands shook as I picked up the phone again, staring at the screen as if it held the answers to my questions. I wanted to scream, to throw it against the wall, to demand why this was happening. But instead, I sat there in silence, engulfed in a storm of my own making. I could hear the clock ticking in the background, each tick a reminder that time was moving on without me. I needed to confront this, to face the reality of my shattered world. But how would I confront Rachel? Would I confront Mark? My emotions were a chaotic mess, and I felt like a puppet with tangled strings, unable to find my footing. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Betrayal cuts deep, and I could feel it gnawing at my insides. I wanted to believe that there had to be an explanation, a reason behind this treachery. But deep down, I knew the truth. Rachel had chosen someone else. The thought of her in the arms of another man, especially my lawyer, was unbearable. As I stood there, the weight of my thoughts pressing down on me, I realized something. I couldn't let this go unanswered. I had to act. I had to find a way to make them both pay for the pain they had inflicted on me. The gears in my mind began to turn, setting the stage for what was to come. I would not be a victim in this story. I would become the author of my own revenge. Our marriage had always felt like a partnership built on trust and mutual respect. Rachel and I met in college, and there was an instant connection. We were young, ambitious, and full of dreams. I was studying business, while Rachel immersed herself in psychology. We complemented each other perfectly, my analytical mind balanced by her emotional intelligence. After graduation, we quickly settled into a comfortable life together, filled with laughter and shared ambitions. I remember the way she used to look at me, her eyes sparkling with a mix of admiration and love. We built our lives together, moving into a cozy little house just outside the city. It was in that house that we celebrated anniversaries, birthdays, and the simple joys of everyday life. I thought we had everything figured out. We even talked about starting a family, planning for a future that seemed bright and full of promise. Mark entered our lives shortly after I landed my first big job. I needed legal advice for a contract negotiation, and a colleague recommended him. From the moment I met him, I was impressed. Mark was sharp, confident, and had a way of making complex legal jargon sound simple. He was also charming, with a smile that could put anyone at ease. I felt fortunate to have him on my side, guiding me through the intricacies of business law. As time went on, Mark became not just my lawyer but also a friend. We shared drinks after meetings, talked sports, and even attended a few parties together. I thought nothing of it when Rachel and I invited him over for dinner. She took a liking to him too. An easy rapport developed between them, one I naively assumed was just a friendship. I saw it as a sign of our good fortune. After all, having a lawyer who understood both personal and professional matters could only be a positive thing. But looking back, I can see the signs I missed. Way they laughed a little too freely at each other's jokes, the glances that lingered a second too long. I brushed off my instincts. After all, Rachel was my wife and I trusted her implicitly. I had no reason to doubt her loyalty. Yet there were moments when I sensed a shift, subtle changes in her demeanor. She became more distant, often lost in thought. I attributed it to the stress of work, the pressures of daily life. I never imagined it was because she was hiding something from me. The turning point came when Rachel started working longer hours at her job. She was a dedicated social worker, passionate about helping others, but I couldn't help but notice how her late nights seemed to coincide with Mark's schedule. I tried to reassure myself that it was all innocent. After all, life was busy for everyone. I convinced myself that our relationship was solid enough to withstand the pressures of work and time apart. But now, standing in our bedroom, I couldn't help but replay those moments in my mind, trying to connect the dots. How could I have been so blind? The betrayal stung even more, knowing that my trust had been misplaced, that I had invited the very man who would become my wife's lover into our lives. It felt like a cruel twist of fate, a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have imagined. I thought about the countless nights we spent together, the dreams we shared, the love we built. It all felt like a lie now, a facade hiding the truth of her infidelity. I felt a wave of rage and sorrow wash over me, choking me with its intensity. I was angry, not just at Rachel and Mark, but also at myself for allowing this to happen. As I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing, I realized that I had to confront this head-on. I couldn't let the shadows of doubt linger any longer. I needed answers. I needed to know why she had chosen him over me, why she had betrayed the vows we made to each other. But more than that, I began to feel a darker urge rising within me. The thought of revenge, of making them both pay for the pain they had caused, began to take root. I wanted to dismantle the life they had built. My trust and love. The idea of justice twisted into something more primal, and I could feel my resolve hardening. I had to act, and I had to do it soon. I would not be a passive player in this game of betrayal. I would become the architect of my own vengeance. The air was thick with tension when Rachel finally came home that evening. I could hear the sound of her keys jangling as she entered the house, the soft click of the door closing behind her. My heart raced, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind 1,000 times, but now that it was here, I felt the weight of my resolve wavering. She called out to me, her voice light and cheerful. "Hey, honey, I'm back." The sound of her voice was like a slap in the face, a reminder of the betrayal that lay just beneath the surface. I remained silent, standing in the shadows of our living room, watching her as she stepped into the light. She looked beautiful as always, her hair cascading over her shoulders, a smile on her face. But all I could see was the woman who had shattered my trust. "Are you okay?" she asked, her smile faltering as she noticed my expression. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. "Rachel, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady though my heart raced. She looked at me, confusion flickering in her eyes. I could see the moment realization dawned on her, the color draining from her face. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, but I didn't want to give her an out. I had to confront her directly. "I know about you and Mark," I said, my words hanging heavy in the air. "I saw the text message. I know what's been going on." Her expression shifted from confusion to shock and then to something I couldn't quite place, guilt perhaps. "David, I can explain." "Explain what?" I interrupted, my anger bubbling to the surface. "How you betrayed me with my lawyer, how you chose him over our marriage. What could you possibly say that would make this any better?" She opened her mouth to speak, but then closed it again, searching for words that wouldn't come. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, trying to find a way out of the corner she had painted herself into. "It's not what you think," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was a mistake. I never meant for it to happen." "A mistake?" I echoed, incredulous. "You think cheating on your husband with my lawyer is just a mistake? You think you can brush it off like it was some minor error? How long has this been going on?" I didn't want to hurt you," she stammered, tears welling in her eyes. "It just happened. Mark and I connected on a level I didn't expect. I thought it was just a fling, something that wouldn't matter. I didn't mean for it to go this far." The betrayal cut deeper with each word. "So you think that makes it okay, that you can just sweep it under the rug because it was just a fling? What about our vows, Rachel? What about the promises we made to each other?" I know," she pleaded, her voice rising in desperation. "I messed up and I am so sorry. I love you, David. I never wanted to hurt you." "Love," I scoffed, the word feeling foreign and bitter on my tongue. "You don't get to use that word, not after what you've done. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't sneak around behind someone's back." She stepped closer, reaching for my hand, but I recoiled, unable to bear her touch. "Please, just let me explain. I was feeling lost, and Mark, he listened to me. He understood me in a way I thought you didn't anymore." "Understand you," I spat. "You think he understands you better than I do. I've been here for you through everything, Rachel. I've supported you, loved you, and this is how you repay me." The tears streamed down her face as she looked at me, her expression a mix of remorse and fear. "I was weak, David. I made a terrible mistake, and I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to make it right." "Anything?" I challenged, my heart pounding with anger and betrayal. "What could you possibly do to make this right? You've destroyed our marriage, Rachel. You've shattered my trust. I don't even know who you are anymore." She fell silent, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I felt a pang of guilt for the pain I was inflicting, but it was overshadowed by the hurt she had caused me. I had loved her fiercely, and now I was left with nothing but the ashes of our relationship. "David, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I need you to believe me. I never wanted this to happen. I want to fix it. I'll end things with Mark, I promise." "End things?" I repeated, feeling a bitter laugh bubble up. "You think that's enough? You think I can just forget this? I can't, Rachel. It's too late." I turned away from her, the weight of the confrontation settling heavily on my shoulders. I felt hollow, as if all the love I had for her had been drained away, replaced by a burning desire for revenge. As I walked away, I knew that I couldn't let this go unanswered. I had to make them both pay for their betrayal. I had to find a way to destroy Mark, to ensure that he would never practice law again. Thought consumed me, igniting a fire within me that I couldn't ignore. After the confrontation, I felt a strange mix of clarity and rage. The emotional turmoil of betrayal had morphed into something dark and resolute. I needed to act, and I needed to act fast. The idea of revenge was intoxicating, a way to reclaim the power that had been stripped from me. I sat in my home office, the dim light casting shadows on the walls, and began to plot my course. Mark was not just my lawyer. He was a man with a reputation, a career built on trust and integrity. The thought of dismantling that career felt both daunting and exhilarating. I needed to be methodical, strategic. This was not just about hurting him. It was about ensuring that he would never have the opportunity to hurt anyone else again. The weight of my intentions pressed down on me, but I embraced it, letting it fuel my resolve. I started to think about how I could gather evidence, something concrete that would not only expose his unprofessional conduct, but also ruin his career. I remembered the late-night meetings he had with Rachel, the casual conversations where he might have let slip something incriminating. I needed to find a way to get inside his world, to unearth the skeletons that might be lurking in his closet. First, I decided to reach out to some of my contacts. I had built a network of professionals over the years, people who could help me gather information without raising any suspicion. I called an old friend from college who had gone into investigative work. "Hey, Mark," I said, keeping my voice casual. "I need a favor. I'm looking for some background on a lawyer, just to make sure he's above board." Mark hesitated. "What's the name?" "Mark Reynolds," I said, injecting a tone of concern into my voice. "I've been hearing some rumors about him, and I want to ensure he's legit." "Reynolds, I can dig into it," he replied. But you know how these things go. If he's clean, there's not much I can do. Yeah, I get that. Just let me know what you find, I said, ending the call. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was the first step in my plan, gathering intel on Mark and figuring out how to exploit his weaknesses. As I waited for Mark to dig up dirt on my lawyer, I started to think about the emotional toll this was taking on me. I was consumed by thoughts of revenge, but I also felt a creeping sense of guilt. I had loved Rachel once. She was my partner, my confidant. But love had turned to ashes, and now I was left with nothing but the desire for retribution. I pushed those feelings aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. The next day, I decided to take a different approach. I would begin to collect evidence on my own. I knew Mark's office was located in a busy part of the city, and I could easily find a reason to be in the area. I planned a visit under the guise of needing legal advice for an unrelated matter. It was a risky move, but I was determined to confront him directly. I arrived at his office building, my heart racing. The sleek glass facade reflected the bustling city around me, a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. I stepped inside, the cool air conditioning washing over me as I approached. The receptionist. "Hi, I'm David and I have an appointment with Mark Reynolds," I said, feigning a casual demeanor. The receptionist smiled and nodded, checking her computer. "He's in a meeting right now, but you can wait in the lounge." "Thanks," I said, taking a seat in the waiting area. I glanced around, noting the framed accolades on the walls, certificates, awards, and photos of Mark with prominent figures. I felt a surge of anger. This was the man who had betrayed me, who had taken my trust and thrown it away. After a few minutes, I saw Mark emerge from his office, his expression shifting from professional to surprised as he spotted me. "David, what a surprise. I wasn't expecting to see you here," he said, his smile faltering slightly. "I needed some legal advice," I replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Thought I'd come to the best." "Of course, let's talk," he said, ushering me into his office. I entered, the familiar scent of polished wood and leather hitting me. I took a seat, my mind racing as I prepared to confront him about Rachel. As we discussed my legal concerns, I kept my questions vague, probing for information about his work practices, his ethics. I needed to gauge how slippery he really was. My instincts told me he was a man who thrived on the trust of others, and I could exploit that. "Mark, you know how important trust is in our line of work," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "What do you do when clients come to you with concerns about confidentiality? I mean, how do you handle it if someone, say, gets too close?" He chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "It's all about boundaries, David. You have to maintain professionalism at all times. It's crucial to keep business and personal life separate." "Of course," I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. I needed to find a way to create a situation where he would slip, where he would reveal his true colors. I left his office with a sense of purpose, ready to gather more evidence. In the following days, I continued to gather intel. I monitored Mark's schedule, looking for patterns, places where he might be vulnerable. I reached out to my friend again, and he called back with some promising news. "David, I found some interesting things about Mark," he said, his voice low. "He has a few complaints filed against him, nothing major, but they could be damaging if brought to light." I felt a rush of excitement. This was the leverage I needed. I began to formulate a plan, combining what I had learned with the evidence I was gathering. I would bring down Mark Reynolds. I would ensure that his career ended in disgrace. The thrill of revenge coursed through me, overshadowing the guilt and pain. I was no longer a victim. I was a man on a mission. The darkness that had taken root in my heart was becoming a driving force, and I was ready to execute my plan. The days turned into a blur as I meticulously executed my plan against Mark. My mind was sharp, focused, and consumed by the singular goal of bringing him down. I had gathered enough information to create a web of evidence that would expose his unprofessional conduct and tarnish his reputation beyond repair. It was time to put my plan into action. I started by compiling all the evidence I had gathered, emails, texts, and notes from my conversations with Mark. I even enlisted the help of my investigative friend to dig deeper into any complaints or misconduct that could be leveraged against him. Every piece of information seemed to fit together like pieces of a puzzle, forming a picture of a man who had crossed ethical lines far too often. One afternoon, I sat at my desk, reviewing everything I had collected. I felt a mix of adrenaline and satisfaction as I organized the documents, creating a dossier that would serve as the foundation of my attack. I had reached out to a couple of former clients of Mark's who had experienced issues with his practices, and they were willing to speak out. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how reckless he had been. It was infuriating, and yet it fueled my desire for revenge. But I knew I needed to be careful. I had to play this right. One wrong move could jeopardize everything. I decided that the best course of action would be to approach the State Bar Association with my findings. They were responsible for regulating lawyers and would take any allegations of misconduct seriously. I meticulously crafted a formal complaint outlining the evidence I had amassed. I included details about the complaints from former clients, emphasizing the breach of ethics and the unprofessional behavior I had witnessed. I made sure to highlight the text messages that revealed his connection with Rachel, framing it as a clear conflict of interest. It felt good to write it all down, to see the words take shape on the page. Once the complaint was ready, I took a deep breath and mailed it. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a rush of exhilaration mixed with trepidation. There was no turning back now. I had set the wheels in motion, and I was determined to see it through to the end. In the days that followed, I waited anxiously for a response. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart raced, half expecting a call from the Bar Association. I monitored Mark's office, watching for any signs of distress or confusion. I wanted to see how he would react when the storm hit. Then one afternoon, I got a call from my friend who had been digging into Mark's past. "David, you won't believe what I found," he said, his voice low. "There are more complaints, serious ones. If the bar gets wind of this, he's done for." My heart raced as I listened to him detail the findings. Mark had been involved in a couple of shady deals and had a history of questionable ethics. The pieces were falling into place perfectly. I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. I was finally gaining the upper hand. As I continued to wait, I also kept an eye on Rachel. She had been trying to reach out to me, sending texts and leaving voicemails pleading for forgiveness. I ignored them all. I couldn't bear to hear her voice, to listen to her excuses. I had made my decision and I was committed to seeing it through. A few weeks later, I received a call from the State Bar Association. "Mr. Anderson, we've received your complaint regarding Mark Reynolds," the representative said. "We take these matters very seriously and will be launching an investigation." I felt a surge of satisfaction wash over me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I thanked the representative and hung up, a grin spreading across my face. I couldn't help but imagine Mark's reaction when he learned that his career was in jeopardy, that he would have to face the consequences of his actions. In the following days, I watched as the investigation unfolded. I could see the cracks beginning to form in Mark's facade. Rumors circulated around the office, whispers of his impending doom. I relished the thought of his unease, knowing that I was the one orchestrating it all. But as the excitement of revenge consumed me, I began to feel the weight of my actions. Was I becoming the very thing I despised? I had set out to destroy Mark, to ruin his life, and yet I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was losing a part of myself in the process. I was no longer just a victim. I had become a perpetrator of my own darkness. Still, I pushed those thoughts aside. I had to remain focused. I needed to see this through to the end. Mark had taken everything from me. It was time for him to pay the price. And then the day came when I received a call from my friend. "David, it's happening. The bar is taking action against Mark. They're moving to suspend his license pending the investigation." I felt a rush of triumph. The plan was working. Mark would be brought to his knees, and I would be the one who had orchestrated his downfall. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the precipice of something far darker than I had anticipated. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about losing myself in the process. But I pushed those feelings down, focusing instead on the victory that was within my grasp. I had come too far to turn back now. I would watch as Mark's world crumbled, and I would be there to witness the consequences of his actions. As the days turned into weeks, the investigation against Mark Reynolds gained momentum. I watched from the sidelines, feeling a mix of exhilaration and dread. The Bar Association's actions were swift and decisive. They suspended his license pending the outcome of the investigation, and soon enough, news of his fall from grace became the talk of the legal community. I reveled in the chaos I had helped create, but with that satisfaction came an unexpected emptiness. I couldn't shake the feeling of isolation. My life had become a whirlwind of revenge, and in the process I had pushed away everyone who cared about me. Rachel continued to reach out, her messages becoming increasingly desperate. I ignored her pleas, focusing instead on the thrill of seeing Mark's downfall. But as I sat alone in my home, I began to realize that I was losing more than just my marriage. I was losing myself. I spent countless nights replaying the events that had led to this moment. I had once been a man filled with dreams, aspirations, and love. Now I was consumed by darkness and vengeance. I wanted to believe that I was doing the right thing, that I was reclaiming my power, but deep down I felt hollow. The thrill of revenge had turned into a burden I hadn't anticipated. Then came the news I had been waiting for. Mark was officially disbarred. The Bar Association had found enough evidence to conclude that he was guilty of multiple ethical violations, including the very conflict of interest I had exposed. I should have felt triumphant, should have celebrated my victory, but instead, I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. In seeking to destroy him, I had inadvertently destroyed a part of myself. I found myself standing in front of the mirror one afternoon, looking at the man who stared back at me. I barely recognized him. The anger, the bitterness, it was all written on my face. I had become a stranger to myself, a man driven by revenge rather than love. I thought about Rachel and the life we had built together, the dreams we had shared. I realized I had sacrificed it all for a fleeting sense of justice. That evening, I finally decided to confront the mess I had created. I picked up my phone and dialed Rachel's number, my heart racing as I waited for her to answer. When she picked up, I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "David, is that you?" "Rachel, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but filled with regret. "Are you finally ready to listen?" she asked, a hint of hope in her tone. "I've been a fool, Rachel. I've let my anger consume me. I've hurt you, and I've hurt myself in the process. I can't keep doing this." There was a pause on the other end, and I could feel the weight of my words hanging in the air. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously. "I mean, I can't keep holding on to this anger. I wanted revenge on Mark for what he did to us, but in doing so, I lost sight of what really matters. I want to talk about us, about what we can do moving forward." "I don't know if we can come back from this, David," she said, her voice trembling. "You've changed. I've changed. I don't know if we can rebuild what we had." "No," I replied, my heart aching. "But I want to try. I want to face this together, even if it's difficult. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." After a long silence, she finally spoke again. "I'm willing to meet, but you need to understand that it won't be easy. Trust has been shattered." "I understand," I said, feeling a flicker of hope. "I just want a chance to work through this with you." The following days were filled with difficult conversations and painful reflections. We met at a cafe, the familiar surroundings tinged with a sense of loss. Rachel looked different, too. There was a sadness in her eyes that broke my heart. We talked for hours, sharing our feelings, our regrets, and our fears. It was painfully raw, but it was also liberating. I realized that I couldn't change the past, but I could work towards a better future. As we navigated the complexities of our relationship, I also took the time to reflect on my actions toward Mark. I had sought to destroy him, but I had become a monster in the process. I began to wonder if my actions had truly been justified. Yes, he had hurt me, but I had crossed a line, becoming someone who thrived on vengeance. In the weeks that followed, I made the decision to reach out to Mark. It was a difficult choice, but I felt it was necessary. I wanted him to know that I regretted my actions, that I had been consumed by anger and pain. I sent him an email, explaining my feelings and acknowledging the darkness I had embraced. I didn't expect forgiveness. I simply wanted to take responsibility for my part in the chaos. To my surprise, he replied. His response was measured, filled with an understanding that I hadn't anticipated. "David, I appreciate your honesty. I've made mistakes too. I don't condone what I did, but I hope we can both learn from this experience." That exchange marked a turning point for me. I realized that revenge had not brought me solace. It had only deepened my pain. As I worked on rebuilding my relationship with Rachel, I also focused on healing myself. I sought therapy to address the anger and hurt that had driven me to such dark places. The road to recovery was long and fraught with challenges, but I was determined to reclaim my life. I had learned that revenge is a hollow victory, one that leaves scars deeper than the wounds it seeks to heal. I had to confront my demons, to face the reality of my actions and their consequences. As I stood on the cusp of a new chapter, I felt a sense of hope. Rachel and I were working to rebuild the trust that had been shattered, and I was learning to let go of the anger that had consumed me. It was a difficult journey, but I was committed to facing it head-on. In the end, I realized that true strength lies not in revenge, but in forgiveness and growth. I had been given a second chance, and I intended to make the most of it. I had learned a hard lesson about love, trust, and the darkness that can lurk within us all. But now, as I stood at the crossroads of my life, I was ready to choose a different path, one filled with healing, understanding, and the possibility of a brighter future. And that was enough.